Today, I'm going to tell you a story that will send chills down your spine, one that might make you question the people around you. It's the case of Alexander Komin, a man whose outward appearance was as ordinary as any of our neighbors. Yet beneath the surface lurked an unspeakable darkness. He lived in the small, quiet village of Viatskia Polani, known to everyone as a friendly electrician, always smiling, always polite. He sold little things at the local market, and people thought nothing of it. But if they had known what he was hiding, no one would have ever gone near him. Komin was born in 1953 in a small town not far from Moscow. His early life was uneventful, but things took a turn after he completed 8 years of school. At just 18 years old, he was convicted of hooliganism and sentenced to 3 years in prison. Prison, normally a place of punishment, became something else for Komin, a breeding ground for his twisted fantasies. Inside the prison walls, Komin worked as a tailor and soon developed a passion for the trade. But more disturbingly, he fell under the influence of another inmate, a man who boasted about keeping homeless people locked in his basement, forcing them to work for him. And rather than being horrified by these stories, Komin was intrigued. The idea of controlling other people, bending them to his will, became an obsession. By the time he was released from prison, he had a plan. He was going to create his own underground empire. Komin wasted no time. Shortly after his release, he began constructing an underground bunker. This wasn't something he could do alone, so he convinced Alexander Mikheyev, a fellow criminal, to help him. It took them nearly 4 years of hard work, digging, building, installing electricity and ventilation. The bunker had multiple rooms, one for sleeping, one for sewing, and even a room with a television. The interior of the bunker was insulated with mattresses to muffle any sound from inside. The only entrance to their underground bunker was a small door through which metal stairs descended. These stairs were connected to 220 volts of electricity to prevent anyone from entering the bunker, but more importantly, to stop anyone from escaping. By early 1995, the bunker was ready, and Komin was eager to put his horrific plan into action. Komin and Mikheyev targeted a specific group of people who would be useful and whom they could easily manipulate into their malicious plan. These were mostly women who came from troubled families or homeless women with nothing of value in life, making them easy to manipulate and lure into the bunker. For weeks, they searched for their victims at local markets, bus stations, and street fairs. But at first, they were unsuccessful. On January 13, 1995, Komin met a woman named Vera Telpayeva and invited her to a late New Year's Eve celebration at his apartment, offering her a drink. She had no reason to be suspicious. He was just a friendly local man, after all. She agreed. But after she drank the vodka he gave her, not knowing it contained dissolved drugs, she passed out. When she awoke, she found herself in complete darkness. She was in the bunker, with no windows, no sunlight, just cold walls and the realization that she was now Komin's prisoner. Komin didn't waste any time telling Vera what her new life would be. She was to sew for him, working long hours in his underground factory. But Vera resisted. She refused to learn how to sew and even tried to bargain for her freedom by offering Komin the name of another woman, Tatiana Melnikova, a professional seamstress. Komin agreed, but of course, he had no intention of letting Vera go, and so Vera remained trapped, with her only hope being that Komin might one day release her if she helped him find more slaves. It wasn't long before Komin tracked down Tatiana Melnikova, but on his way to capture her, he encountered Nikolai Malik, a former inmate. Komin invited Nikolai and his girlfriend Tatiana Melnikova to his garage for a drink, to celebrate after so many years, and they agreed. He drugged Nikolai and Tatiana's drinks with clonidine, rendering them unconscious. Together with Mikheyev, he dragged Nikolai out into the freezing cold. Nikolai's body was found a week later, lifeless, frozen. He had become Komin's first known murder victim. The police wrote off this case as another instance of a drunken man who got lost and succumbed to the low temperatures overnight. With Nikolai out of the way, Komin finally captured Melnikova and brought her to the bunker. Unlike Vera, Tatiana was a skilled seamstress and proved valuable to Komin. She sewed everything from house robes to oven mitts, items that Komin and Mikheyev would then sell at the local market. To the outside world, he was just a man selling handmade goods to earn a living, but behind closed doors, his slaves were working under unimaginable conditions. Despite her usefulness, Tatiana wasn't safe from Komin's cruelty. He physically abused both her and Vera, subjecting them to long hours of work and violent punishments when they failed to meet his impossible demands. For several days, they were left without food, surviving on potatoes and their peels. They were allowed to shower only once a week, sharing a single bucket of water. Soon after, they found a market for their products and came up with the idea to expand the bunker and add more slaves, as two were not enough for the growing workload. While roaming the town, Komin and Mikhail came across Yevgeny Shishov, a 37-year-old alcoholic. Komin learned that Shishov was an electrician and immediately saw him as a threat. He couldn't risk anyone tampering with his electrical setup, so he devised a new method of torture, an electric chair of his own design. He tied Shishov to the chair, forcing Vera and Tatiana to flip the switch, electrocuting him whenever he pleased. It was another show of Komin's absolute control. But soon after, Komin decided to kill Shishov to ensure Vera's silence. In his mind, it was a necessary act to keep his evil empire intact. Then, on July 16, 1995, Vera delivered another girl into captivity, Tatiana Kozakova, a young woman only 22 years old. She had no idea what awaited her. Tatiana Melnikova taught her how to sew, and together they began working to meet Komin's ever-growing demands. 32 house robes a day. That's what he expected from them. They worked 16-hour a day, their bodies exhausted, their spirits broken. However, Tatiana Kozakova did not lose hope. Instead, she searched every day for a way to escape, encouraging the other two women to join her in the plan. Kozakova noticed that every time Komin entered the bunker, he deactivated the electrified ladder. Seizing an opportunity, one day they decided to try to escape. They locked Komin in one of the bunker's rooms and tried to barricade the door, but Komin managed to break free, and the result was pure hell for the women. His punishment? He gave them two choices: have their mouths cut from ear to ear, or be branded with the word slave on their faces. They chose the tattoo, a mark that would forever remind them of their imprisonment. After this, Komin grew even more paranoid and brutal. He implemented new rules, forcing the women to chain themselves to the wall whenever he entered the bunker. His control over them was absolute, and he enjoyed every second of it. But Vera wasn't done yet. Komin tasked her with finding yet another victim. He released her from the bunker so she could lure more slaves to work for him. But this time, she did not return. Vera managed to escape, disappearing without a trace. Komin was so certain that Vera was too scared to report him to the police. And unfortunately, he was right. Having lost another slave, Komin and his friend Mikhail set out in search of a new one. Soon, they set their sights on another woman, Tatiana Nazimova. They also offered her a job and a place to stay. And soon, like the previous victims, she ended up in their bunker. However, Nazimova was mentally ill, something the two Alexanders did not know. When they realized she would not be useful for the work they needed her for, they exploited her and forced her to fulfill all of their sick sexual fantasies, unleashing their anger on her. On Komin's surprise one day, he accidentally ran into Vera at a local market. Vera had once again fallen into his clutches, and this time, there was no escape. Komin forced her to cooperate with him again, making her find stores that would buy his products and bringing more victims to the bunker. But Vera's usefulness had run out. Shortly after, she brought another girl to the bunker. She was a young woman and a mother of a little daughter. She was looking for a better life and a job so she could provide for her child, and Vera promised her that. Irina Ganyushkina was desperately searching for work in those difficult times, and she agreed to Vera's offer. Like the previous victims, she was invited to a welcoming drink, after which she was drugged and lost consciousness. When she awoke in the dark bunker, Irina realized what was happening and what kind of trap she had fallen into. Now Komin finally had the opportunity to take revenge on Vera for her earlier escape, and he gave her two options. Either one of the other women would inject antifreeze into her veins, or she would drink it herself. Feeling guilty for everything she had done to the other women, Vera decided that no one should be responsible for her death, and chose the second option. After 11 hours of poisoning, Vera died in the most excruciating pain, and her body was thrown into the nearby river. As for Nazimova, her health deteriorated, and although the other women begged Komin to provide her with proper medical help, Komin refused. He killed her in the same way as Vera, injecting her with antifreeze. Irina, unlike the others, caught Komin's eye in a different way. He became infatuated with her, even to the point of wanting to marry her. Irina was the only woman in the bunker who did not work at the sewing machines. Instead, she spent most of her time with Komin. According to the other women, there were times when the two of them spent entire nights together in the room next to theirs, fulfilling his sexual desires and fantasies. His obsession was so intense that he attempted to artificially inseminate her, hoping to create a new generation of slaves for himself. But Irina saw an opportunity. She and the other women devised a plan. If she agreed to marry Komin, they might have a chance to escape. Irina agreed to marry Komin and spent several months with him in his house. According to Irina, Komin was one person in the bunker and a totally different person in the outside world. She even felt safe and carefree in his presence at times, and for moments, she enjoyed what she had with him. However, she did not allow her feelings to sway her, and she played along. One day when Komin wasn't home, she made her move. She ran to the nearest police station and told them everything. At first, the police didn't believe her story. How could such horror be happening right under their noses? But as she gave more details, names, locations, descriptions of the bunker, their skepticism faded. The police launched a rescue operation, and on July 21st, 1997, Komin was arrested outside his garage. Inside the bunker, Melnikova and Korzakova were found alive but severely traumatized. After 2 years without sunlight, they had to be bandaged around their eyes to prevent blindness. They were immensely grateful to Irina for coming with the police to save them, and they told her that they prayed every day and never lost hope in her and their plan. Komin's accomplice, Mikhail, was arrested shortly afterward. Although he tried to defend himself by claiming that he was manipulated by Komin and worked with him under duress, the investigation and the women's testimonies revealed otherwise. He was convicted of 4 murders and was sentenced to 20 years in prison. Komin, however, was sentenced to life imprisonment, but before he could serve his sentence, he took his own life in his cell, cutting his femoral artery. So now, let me ask you, what do you make of this? It's the kind of story that makes you think twice about the people living next door, doesn't it? Do we ever really know who our neighbors are, or are we just comforting ourselves with the illusion that we do?